Hello and welcome to Sugar, Silk and Stretch, a unique boxing podcast brought to you exclusively by Ace Podcast Nation. We don't have Gary Stretch on board this week because he's busy doing whatever ex-boxers...
People your name first.
Say again? Yeah, my name's Ben Doughty.
And my name is Michael Silcolagide. Now go ahead.
Do you know, I'm not sure what's going on this time, Michael, because I was trying to get my head around doing this because we don't have a technical assistant on Friday nights, and I thought we'd have an intro first. We seem to have gone straight in live. You know, it is what it is. So I don't know what, if you're viewing this now, I don't know what you actually saw. I also wonder if people are just waiting, expecting us to come on live in 2 hours. But Silk and I are going to make a show as best we can. I approve of the fact you just lowered yourself a little bit, so we're on the same level now, because that was bugging me. You know how I'm.
Yes, although I still do look ethereal.
You do look ethereal. I don't have a problem with you looking ethereal. That is permissible. That is fine. I just thought it was just a bit out of alignment. You know how I obsess about the smallest details.
Yeah, I noticed that. I've noticed it.
Yeah. So talking of that, and not so small detail, it's become apparent in the last 48 hours that the IBF have taken the decision to strip Terence Crawford of their welterweight strap. And they have, as is their want in this day and age, they have upgraded the former interim champion, Ennis, to the full status as full champion. It was something initially, Michael, that just appeared that way on the IBF website, and the various journalists were asking questions saying, what's going on here? It appears that Ennis has suddenly morphed into the full champion overnight. They have confirmed it.
Why did they strip Crawford?
For not fighting Ennis, so, because basically they mandated, Ennis as his next challenger, which is absolutely right and proper. Ennis is the logical next man, to face Crawford. I agree. I mean, and he looks special.
He's also rated in the WBA and WBC, I would say. Crawford, Brutes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he certainly had high rankings with all of them, I believe. But the thing is, they knew that the reason why Crawford is not willing to or able to accommodate Ennis is because he has a rematch clause with Errol Spence, despite the one-sided nature of that fight earlier this year. So consequently, that is why this decision has been taken. But the thing is, you know what? I applaud the IBF for ordering him to fight Ennis, and I'd much rather see that than a Spence rematch. I think anybody into boxing, first and foremost, would do. But there's got to be a better solution than this. And even if you're going to strip the guy of the title, surely have a more ceremonial coronation, of your new champion at least. Because what they're doing, Iceman John Scully said this a while ago, they're ruining boxing history to the point where you couldn't possibly write down the last 40 years now in any readable kind of noble fashion, because it's also...
You automatically couldn't do that, Ben, because there are 3 world champions. So whenever you have that kind of disparity, arguably 4, right?
Well, no, you definitely 4. Get with the program. It's been 4 for decades.
Well, there's 4, so there's even more convolution than 3. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's pretty hard to keep a straight line. Even the most ardent is going to have a hard time keeping up with who is who and when and who's the legitimate champion, who's the lineal champion, all of us, that kind of stuff. It's impossible. It is what it is now. It's words. It's alphabet soup, and it's a popularity contest, and it's also a monetary contest. Like, the champion is the one who generates the most money. That's who everybody wants to fight, and that's who gets the eyes in front of the TV.
Yeah, and as well as the fact they're ruining boxing history and have done, that's not a newsflash. That's been going on for decades. But in addition to that fact, they're ruining the kind of careers and legacies and stories of guys like Ennis. Ennis is a special fighter who's got bags of talent, bags of charisma. He's extremely watchable and exciting, and you want to see how special a talent he is and how he's going to match up with certain leading lights in the division, and potential super fights even. He could be that category of fighter. But what they're doing is, you didn't win a world title, but at least you remember the highlights of your career, and they took place in some organic, logical way, some of them. Whereas when you talk about, suppose Ennis defends this position and consolidates it for a while, like Gennady Golovkin, there was never a moment, because Golovkin was essentially upgraded as well, So they don't get that moment of crowning glory. Even Marvin Hagler, as kind of negative and rancorous and controversial as it was, at least it was a moment. Do you know what I mean? When he got showered with bottles in England. Ennis has been told he's world champion by a phone call or an email or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one thing that does do, I mean, earning it in the ring, there's nothing like defeating somebody, like being to go back, as you said, going back in your mind. And this is my stage 1, step 2, stage 2, stage 3. And I fought this guy and I got to the title and I won it in that fight. So then there's that crowning achievement that every fighter is looking for. To have it delivered to you in the mail, as you said, or via email. It's, you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm IBF champion. Wow, I didn't fight anybody, but you deserve it, or you're the best fighter in the division. And to Ennis, he probably thinks, well, there isn't anybody I wouldn't beat anyway, so you may as well give it to me. But there really should officially be, if it's not Crawford, then they should just say, well, listen, the number 1 contender and the number 2 contender are going to fight each other for the title. And that's
Absolutely.
it. That's how they should make the fight. The 2 top contenders fight for the fight. We're going to strip him, fight for the title, and that way it's done right. I think by stripping Crawford and giving it directly to Ennis, I don't think that's a good practice.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Ken Norton. I don't know if we were on air when you mentioned Ken Norton, or that was just before we came on. But I have never regarded and never accredited Ken Norton as being a world heavyweight champion, and I simply won't have it. Some people argue with a certain amount of reasonableness that his fight with Jimmy Young was essentially his world title fight, and because he beat him in a final eliminator, Leon Spinks wouldn't fight him because he wanted to have the rematch with Ali, and but I just simply won't have it. Even though I think Kenny was damned unlucky to lose to Ali the third time at the Polo Grounds in 1976, but nonetheless, he's not a world heavyweight champion. And anytime somebody cites him to me as a former world heavyweight champion, I'll immediately jump on it and say, no, he wasn't, because he lost all the 3 title fights he had.
I don't know very many people that would say Ken Norton was world champion. A great person.
They say it, Michael. Honestly, they say it. Honestly, they do. And it's. See, I hang around. I know you're in boxing and you live in boxing, but I really live in it to the point where people are talking it day in, day out, and calling me up all the time wanting to. Yeah. And that is a thing, that Ken Norton was a former world heavyweight champion, and certainly he has more credible claim, you might think, than some of the latter guys, like a Sergei Lakowitz or something like that. You know what I mean? He certainly had a better career. Ken Norton is a Hall of Famer, but once again, I'm a hardliner with the Hall of Fame, and I don't think he quite cuts it, but he's in there.
Yeah. That's I think a lot of it is, it's just that throwback to the time. I mean, that was the golden age for boxing, and it has our memories. Like current day people who can make the decisions to put people into the Hall of Fame, they grew up watching Ken Norton and being, admiring him, admiring his heart, admiring his physique, admiring, he cut into movie stars, so he got into that pop fame as well.
Yeah.
And so you tend to make much more of his ability than what you would think. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and I saw Ken Norton fight. And they showed pictures of this guy, and his body, he was like Adonis. I was just like, oh my God, this guy's a monster. This is like who you want to be built like. I mean, you're like 9, 10 years old. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, this guy's Hercules. And it's a natural thing. And so as a man, you appreciate that, his presence, his ability. He was soft spoken. He had he had a really good aura about him. And so, yeah, he gave off all those vibes as a champ and as somebody you respect. But in the ring, that wasn't accomplished. And that has to officially happen in order for it. And he put up a great fight against Holmes. It was a great fight. Yeah. But you know what I mean? But Larry Holmes came out.
Well, you know something? If he'd have got let's suppose he'd have got the nod against Ali in 76. And I when I watched it years ago all the way through, I thought, I'm an Ali man like you are, but I thought Ali had lost the fight. I just figured he'd lost the fight. As simple as that. I wish he had. I wish I didn't see it that way, but I did. But if he'd have got the decision against Ali, and imagine he'd have got the nod against Holmes as well, that would be one hell of a game changer legacy-wise, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it certainly would have. You know what the wildest thing? I have never brought myself to watch any of those 3 fights in their entirety. So I think I have to do that. You know what I mean? So I can really break it down honestly and digest that. Because, I mean, Ken does deserve it. And and Ali's the greatest. There's nothing wrong with what it's hard to watch Ali so devoid of all this ability that he once had, and to see him, fighting Ken Norton like that, and not nearly at his peak or top of his abilities.
He wasn't as interested then, he wasn't as focused, and you could tell the chemistry and the relationship between him and Angelo Dundee had dulled at that point, because you see in that fight, right? I can't remember what round it is, but it's in maybe the last 5 rounds, of a 15 rounder, and Ali I think he's standing up in the corner, and Dundee is saying to him, "You're better off going to him, Muhammad. It's better than what you're doing right now." And he's so despondent. It's a bit like he's fulfilling his contractual obligations. You know what I mean? And maybe they've had a row. They might have had a row just in the dressing room or something, or maybe they didn't get on in that camp. But you could tell that Dundee doesn't really care. You saw him with Ray Leonard being like, "Be my man. You got him crazy. You made these people take notice. 6 minutes." With Ali at that point, he was like, "Muhammad, you're better off going to him." And maybe he was fed up with the way Ali wouldn't listen to him, maybe, and didn't think anybody could tell him anything. So he was just offering quietly, "Listen, if you want my advice, you need to back Norton up." But he looked like he'd given up the ghost, Angie, a little bit.
Well, the thing is, Angelo knows how to play personalities. That's one of the things that one of his greatest strengths was knowing individuals. So he could say things that were pertinent to the moment, yet at the same time, he'd say it, in a very languid way. He'd be laid back. And he just tries to identify with what a guy's thinking or feeling and give it to you that way. And then sometimes, you get the emotional Ange and who's just like how he was against, Ray against Hearns or Ray against, any Duran or anybody. I'm sure he was like fervent in the first Duran fight. Like, how could you change? How could you make a difference there? And you can't lay back in a moment like that. But with someone like Ali, who's been there before and has just done everything that has to be done, at some point you just know you're talking to somebody that, not that he's unresponsive because he doesn't like you or respect you, but it's just your adrenaline, the stores of adrenaline are not the same as they once were. And so, you know what I mean? It's just, they're depleted. That's all there is to them. And he understands that. So he can say things, but he knows that and it's not like they're falling upon deaf ears. He just doesn't have the chemistry within him to pull that out.
Yeah.
And emotionally, and also Ben, and emotionally. So fast forward a couple of years later, and he has the ability to do that against Foreman, but Foreman was a different.
That wasn't a couple of years later. Well, I'm talking about the last fight, 1976.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the first fight with Norton, right?
No, we're talking about the last one with Norton. We're talking about the last one.
Okay, I was talking about
that was the world title fight. That was the point.
Okay, so the Norton fight and the Foreman fight, between the first one and the Foreman fight, when Ali was, that was a lackluster performance he put. Many people would say he lost that.
But I feel we're getting off the point, because the idea was the other 2 Norton fights are non-title fights, and the notion was that Norton could have become a world champion, possibly, and he was later, made a world champion in a boardroom when Leon Spinks refused to face him. But regardless,
but then the other point I was talking about, Ali and Ali's ability to respond to Angelo. So that's where we kind of
I understand that.
Diverged.
But I understand that. Staying on the track of the Alphabet Boys theme, they were around, certainly. They've been around, in another format since the 1920s. But by the time that Ali beat Leon Spinks in the rematch in New Orleans and then retired, that was when they really got their teeth into professional boxing. And things, it kind of metastasized into the crazy situation we have today, Michael, because suddenly it was throughout the 60s, they had a WBC and a WBA guy often, but it really seemed to take root and enter the public consciousness and everything else in the 80s when you had, obviously you had Larry Holmes who won the vacant WBC title against Kenny Norton, and you had that merry-go-round, you remember, of the WBA title, just like pass the parcel. And then obviously, as you alluded to a little earlier, you got the advent of the IBF in 1983, 84-ish. And then towards the end of the 80s, you got the WBO. And then now we have this situation when, if that wasn't bad enough, and it would have seemed crazy 20 or 30 years earlier to have 4 major sanctioning bodies, it was the way that the bodies, like particularly the WBA, they started splintering their own title recognition, then having a super champion or a regular champion and an interim champion. I know our friend John Scully, who never tires of campaigning for things he regards as being in the interest of boxing. He says, how can you have an interim champion when there's nothing wrong with the existing champion?
Okay, so let me ask you something, Ben. Stop right there for a second. If it brings more eyes to the screen, if it brings more interest to the sport, is it not worth it?
Well, you think it does bring more interest to it?
I'm asking you. I'm the contrarian today. So
I think that the public, it's all very well being a contrarian, but it's
I'm
nice
asking.
and I will deal with it. What I was going to say is,
question.
It would be nice as well if we could use our platform to try and, in the minute influence we've got, to try and do some good as well. But okay, let's go.
Sometimes you have to question things in order to get to the truth, right? You can't just go along with one frame of thought.
So no, true. So no, I think that the public have been alienated, a lot of them, by the confusion over who world champion is, and a lot of people tell me, of a certain age anyway, a lot of people tell me that they drifted away from the sport when it wasn't just that, it was also the it was not on terrestrial television anymore. They didn't know who was who. They couldn't name the champions, and it all got very confusing for them. I think
And you think that's the reason why they drifted away from the sport? You don't think it's like maybe like the lack of personality or too many commercials, or you know what I mean? Like fighters, people identify with fighters, and you see a character trait in a fighter, and you look at Rocky Marciano, you love his characteristic traits. You see Muhammad Ali, you loved his characteristic traits. You love the way they came back, the way they fought back.
But partly,
when you have fighters,
today,
partly because they were the undisputed hardships, and they come back. And they fight, and people can't identify with these guys.
But listen, that was because they were the heavyweight champion of the world. That was Mr. America. That was Mr. World. They wouldn't have that same gravitas if they were the WBC champion. There was another guy, the IBF, and there was a WBA regular champion. They wouldn't have that chance to symbolize as much as they did. So much has changed in culture, in entertainment and sports. But the fact that they were the heavyweight champion of the world, which is basically a redundant concept, all but now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't be like, that Kings of the Ring documentary, which charts the kind of progression since Jack Dempsey to Mike Tyson, and it explains the importance of the world heavyweight champion and the way in which they mirrored their ages, their eras. There's now, you couldn't make that documentary today because, Tyson Fury does mirror his age in many ways, an age of clickbait and disingenuous, claims and showbiz, but
Ben, to stay on the point, you have like the WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO. They're competing against one another.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. So if you were to look at these organizations and they're separate fractions of whatever, they identify who a world champion is in their eyes. You have at least 4 different organizations and bodies looking at one guy, and if they give them his title, like they did with Boots Ennis, for instance, they gave him his title. They gave him the title. That means he's their guy, and he's the guy that's got all the eyes on him. He's the guy that people are talking about. He's the it guy of the moment, right? So he's the it guy of the division. And
no, he's not. No, Terence Crawford is.
Well, Terence Crawford is looking at super fights now. He's thinking about Canelo. He's thinking about.
Sure, but
he's fighting for money right now. He's not thinking about getting the title because the title will allow him to get to money. Now he's made that. He's won the title. He's done that. He's done that big fight that's got him on the tips of everyone's tongue. Now he's looking to make more money. He's not worried about. He's not saying like, okay, so the WBA or WBC, IBF, whatever. They say, listen, this is the bid for this fight. This bid for this fight is $2 million that you and Boots are gonna split. Like this, he's like. But I can make $50 million fighting Canelo Alvarez. Why am I going to make $1 million fighting Boots? That's just the economics of it. That just absolutely plainly makes sense. So yes, he's going to ignore the IBF or whoever has the title, and he's going to say, you know what? Forget it. I worked and I toiled since I was a teenager. I fought hard. I suffered concussions. I've been knocked out. I knocked people out. All of that kind of stuff. I need that. I need to show that there's, I need to see that part at the end of the rainbow. So that's what a fighter's going through, and I completely understand that. But at the same time, yeah, by not recognizing the pastime of boxing itself, going back to the glory years of Ali and Marciano and Jake LaMotta and and all those guys. But one thing that's a constant in this world with every single living organism and every single business thing we do on this planet is change. Change is the only guarantee. It's always going to happen. And that's what's happening in boxing. Change is happening. And we have to be able to adapt and go with it, is what I'm really trying to say.
Well, what? So you don't believe in any kind of movement against this and to try and restore, or even just create, never mind restore, just create an undeniable, logical sense of a world number one. Whatever tournaments they want to have, like a Super Six or a Super Four or a Super 8.
Yeah, but by recognizing 4 different organizations, by already identifying them and going by their way of judging for a champion. If you got 2, you can have 10. If you have 10, you can have 20.
Well, do you know what Bob Arum said? Bob Arum said that I hope there are 10, in a few years from now. And he said this a long time ago. And they said, why? He said, because hopefully it will destroy them. He said, and they will have no relevance and leverage whatsoever. He said, I hope the titles proliferate so badly that it becomes a complete joke. And then we can get back to, then we can actually ignore them. That was Arum's take on it. So obviously he didn't.
Yeah, I believe that. But I believe there also has to be some kind of like burn down, build back up. Something has to be built back up again, and someone has to do it better than what it was. And there are very few people. Everyone's just so unimaginative in boxing. They stick to the same old, you know what I mean? The same old layout, and nobody rethinks the sport. And that's the problem with boxing today. It's not the fact that we have 10 titles, 5 titles, recognize 3 guys. It's like nobody's doing it better. Nobody's making the sport better. Everyone's just trying to make money in the sport. And that's the biggest problem.
And Dana White, who's obviously done fantastically well with the UFC brand,
in boxing,
he said that he is very critical of boxing and the way it's run. And he speaks.
He promoted a fight here in New York last night, I believe.
Okay, so he identifies as a boxing fan, but he says that boxing is its own worst enemy. And echoing what you just said there, he said that in boxing, every fight is a going out of business sale. That's like get as much money as you can and get out of town.
Hey, did I tell you, Ben? Did I ever tell you that I certified him?
What you certified? How do you mean?
You know what? I certified.
Oh yeah. I remember you did say that.
That's so crazy. Okay, we won't go into that again. Sorry, people. You have to look in the older episodes for it.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's the thing. When people say, because listen, I was brought up in that 1980s KO magazine, Ring magazine era when all the journalists relentlessly slammed the sanctioning bodies. They call this episode is called "Fuck the Alphabet Boys," just to get a little bit of attention, ahead of what we are talking about.
Your words, not mine. Let's make it clear. Those are your words, not mine.
Yeah, Michael Alagide doesn't say "fuck the Alphabet Boys." Ben Doughty does. Gary Stretch, God knows what he would say if he was here. I imagine he'd have some annoying take on it as well. But anyway, somebody said, by the way, I don't want to get sidetracked on what I was about to say, but somebody said last week Stretch talks the most sense, and I was like, myself and Michael Alagide beg to differ on that point, and we cannot we cannot stress that enough. But I was brought up in that era of 1980s boxing magazines, and all the journalists were relentlessly against what they derisively referred to as the Alphabet Boys. And I didn't think anybody in boxing was in favour of multi-titles and splinter titles except the sanctioning bodies themselves. And then there was an interview with Alexis Arguello in KO magazine, and they said, "How do you feel about the splintering of titles and the fact there's 3 world champions at every weight nowadays?" And they probably expected him to say the same as everybody says, "Oh, it's ridiculous." And Arguello said, "No, it's better. It's better that way because more people get to make money and more people get exposure, etc., etc." So now
that's generally what you feel like. I'd like to say that every fighter starts fighting because they have this dream as a little boy of becoming the strongest, fastest, baddest man on the planet. But that's not really it, especially when you see everybody else around you is the promoters, the managers, the trainers, everybody is making money before the fighter gets it. And so that's why a fighter has to start thinking financially about himself first. And that's why multiple titles is good for boxing.
But
Whether I like it or not is a different thing. But the fact the financial
my problem with that, here's my problem with that. Here's my problem with that, and it always has been. It's an emperor's new clothes argument. It doesn't make any sense. A fight should have a commercial worth. It should have an organic value. If you're saying it's got this inflated, hang on. If you're saying it's got this inflated value because it's got this strap attached to it and it's selling itself as something it isn't, then you have a problem. I've got a problem with that on so many levels. The audience must be thick as planks, and you know what I would say is, let's have a world number one, a logical world number one at every weight that is identifiable, because that is the way most professional sports are run. That's just a logical thing. That's just a matter of integrity, regardless of it being a business and it being all about the money. But I say also, let's have new, like you just said, let's have new initiative. Let's have tournaments. Let's have ways in which fighters can earn their commercial worth. Let's not be obsessed with it. The only way they can make money is if we pretend they're the best in the world.
But here's what they do in boxing. You say, okay, so they'll look at a fight and they'll say, okay, you're going to fight for the world title. And because it's a world title, that's worth $5 million to you. If you're not fighting for the world title,
not the world title, Michael.
That exact same fight. No, that exact same fight. If neither Boots or Crawford were world champions, and you said you're going to put that fight on between number one, number two contender, they're going to say, okay, here's 100,000 for you, and here's 250,000 for you. That's what they're going to do. But as it's a fight, that's going to start being millions now. When you put the word world title behind it,
that's ignorance, isn't it?
It's $1 million fight.
That's ignorance, isn't it? And don't say world title. Don't say the world title. Say a world title. It is massively important. I cannot stand people saying we won the world title or he's the world champion. No. Canelo Alvarez is the super middleweight world champion. He is. And Charlo was the light middleweight world champion. But then the sanctioning bodies have interfered with that and taken one of them from him, haven't they? Like they always do. But see, so basically that is based on ignorance. It's based on TV executive ignorance. It's based on the audience is ignorance. It's if we pretend it's a world title, you wouldn't get you probably do. I was going to say you wouldn't get like a restaurant serving sardines on toast and claiming it was lobster thermidor, but you probably do. No doubt you do get things that are overrated and they just go on their reputation and branding, no doubt. But that is I don't see. Listen, Ward and Getty made good money fighting each other, and 3 absolute back-to-back classics. It wasn't builders for a world title at all. They've been historically remembered. Legacy is absolute legacy.
But how much do you think they made on that fight?
I know they made like 7-figure paydays. Certainly for the less
7 figures, meaning in the millions.
Yeah. Well, of course, it has to be. Otherwise, you could not. You don't get.
So you think Ward made millions of dollars off that?
Not millions, no, like $1 million.
On the first fight or the second fight?
No, not the first one. No, absolutely not the first one. Certainly the third fight.
Okay, so the third fight. But the fact that they had to have 2 of those fights in the beginning, that man put out more energy and more effort than you would see 5 world champions fight with. You know what I mean? And he doesn't get rewarded for that performance. And he wasn't, he was for the world title, but didn't get rewarded for that kind of performance.
But you say but let's put
oh man, what's the kid's name? Oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue. From Philadelphia, who also beat Gotti first. Ivan Robinson, yes. You know what I mean? It wasn't a world title fight. Incredible performance. Took as many punches, got hit hard, did everything that you would ask a world title ask of a world title. Did he get that? No. Why? Because it doesn't have WBC world champion.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate. Getty and Ward, right? If they'd been fighting for a world title, let's say a third time, or any of the times, but so it would have still been at Atlantic City Boardwalk Hall, probably, right? So same venue. Same live gate, sold out, yes? So that wouldn't have changed, no? HBO, I imagine, would HBO have paid them more for it? Because they'd have had to pay sanctioning fees to the whichever body was calling it a world title fight. So that would have been money out of the coffers, right? For the sanctioning fees.
Probably like $250,000, probably.
Okay. So would they definitely have made more money? Did they definitely need a belt to say they could have made more money in that trilogy?
Well, I think there's a sense of excellence when you put world title before it. When you have a belt, a recognizable belt in front of it, it does change the marketing. Yeah, it makes the fight worth more money.
But it's
That's
silly,
why,
isn't it? And
these
we've
guys.
become too obsessed with it,
You see the
and we need to
WBC,
fix up.
green belt, right? They take that green belt and they put it to the forefront because one, it's distinctive. One, it's the same belt that Muhammad Ali held up in the ring, Roberto Duran held up.
Hang on, once again, sorry, Ali never. I never see Ali hold it up in the ring hardly ever. It wasn't a thing in his era.
So hardly ever, but he has had it in the ring.
I never saw him have it in the ring ever. I've never actually seen him. I've seen picture of Ali with a WBC belt, usually in his dotage when he was older. But honestly, they didn't hold up belts in that era, and certainly not in Robinson's era. They didn't do it. It was because people weren't so fixated with it. We have become so obsessed. This is a societal problem. We've become obsessed with frippery, branding, and dressing, and we dress everything up.
The brand is, they put the brand in front of the individual, but that's the thing, because people want to do that who have the brand, because their brand outlasts the individual, and you want
absolutely
you want to put value in the brand because that brand has to last for a long time.
Yeah. And this is why, incidentally, you're not getting the good fights. So, we're getting some good fights, of course. There's always good fights. But it's why we're not getting a lot of the fights we'd like to see. And it's I think we need a reset. The UFC, I don't know much about it, but from what I understand, they don't have all these titles, right? And I realize they're not a sport.
No, they don't. But at the same time, they have fighters that are grossly underpaid, and they're and physically they're so abused, even kicked in the face. You know what I mean? Broken fibula, tibula, whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's like they're just they get ill abused as any fighter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing people say. They apparently the perception is that UFC is better for the fans but worse for the fighters, whereas boxing might arguably be better for the boxers in the direction of the boxers nowadays. Some of them, but not necessarily so ideal for the fans.
So as a fighter, when you decide to make that move and you're going to fight for a world title, or they choose you, things open up for you a little bit more. I would think more so. I don't know a lot about UFC and mixed martial arts and all the other organizations that go with it, but I do know that it is a very, it's very primitive. It's just starting as well. And in fact, it's almost like that's what boxing was before it evolved to boxing. And then boxing is devolving, and then this MMA is coming up again. So you're going back to, because there was a time when a guy had to just raise his knee up off the canvas and you go whack him. You know what I mean? Like in boxing, like if you make a move like you're getting up off the ground, you're going to catch a right uppercut. Or
what, you mean Dempsey's era, Dempsey and Willard?
Yeah. And even before then, you know what I mean? You used to be able to kick guys, trip guys. You just couldn't gouge their eyes, kind of thing. So boxing's been through this whole evolution, and finally, with the Marquis of Queensberry rules and fairness and all the rest of this thing, it kind of evened out. And now it seems to hit its zenith, I guess. And now it's going towards the nadir, is dropping off, and is dropping off drastically. And boxing's being hurt by it, but maybe some things have to burn down in order to be like a forest fire. New life comes up under the ashes always, and so maybe we're in the midst of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, moving into the next topic, but with a connection to what we've been talking about. I was going to say earlier that in your era, you guys have won world champion in your division, one world champion to shoot for. So you had that old school sense of majesty that there was the title, there was the champion, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and that was where your kind of ambitions were focused on as an up and coming world class middleweight. 40 years ago today, he took on legendary Roberto Duran at Caesars Palace, Las Vegas, in a fight that was actually. I remember at the time, people were kind of disappointed with it and thought it was a little bit of an anticlimax. But I've got to tell you, today, I think it's a wonderful fight.
Yeah, when you look at it, and you look at it for Roberto's skills, and like you look at I mean, that's the first thing you do. You look at like how did Duran go the distance with Hagler? Hagler's this monster who's tearing up middleweights, and here's a guy who grew from like lightweight to welterweight to junior middleweight, fighting middleweight, fighting one of the most feared fighters and a legitimately all-time great fighter of all time. And how did he go the distance and even make the fight competitive? And it's interesting because to me, sometimes I mean it depends on the eyes you look through. I remember looking at the fight, and I wasn't quite sure if I saw it as a runaway for Hagler or a close fight. I definitely didn't think Duran won.
You definitely didn't think Duran. You mean you definitely didn't see him winning ahead of time?
Well, I look at it like this. Like even afterwards, I said, if you're Duran's mom, I'd vote like 8-6 in favor of Hagler. And if I was Hagler's mom and I was scoring that fight, I would be 12-3.
Yeah, honestly, Michael, I agree with you, because if you look at it, people make a lot of the fact that Duran was ahead after the 12th round, and Hagler needed to put on a good, strong finish to save his title. But honestly, I think he won 10 rounds out of those 15. I think it's that perception again. When the underdog does so unexpectedly well, people tend to invest even more in that performance. And next thing you know, he's robbed almost. Duran thinks he was robbed.
Also, Ben, the way I like to say to look at fights is like if you're looking at your favorite fighter, that's one of the most like Duran takes your eyes. When you look at Duran, you look at the way he moves, his mannerisms. He's very like he's physically charismatic. His movements are charismatic. His actions, his mannerisms, just the way he moves, everything he does. He's like Ali, like Sugar Ray Robinson. He has a charismatic physicality. And so you look at that and you say to yourself, like, wow. And you're not looking at what Hagler's doing at all. You're just looking at what Duran does. And I find myself, even today, if I were to look at that fight, I get blinded by what Duran's doing. And I'm not looking at what Hagler's doing and throwing the numbers he's putting up, his movement, how some punches are missing, he's catching some stuff. That's not what I'm doing. So that's one of those things, again, that physical charisma that takes away points from Hagler, actually. So
yeah, and that was the. It's strange in a way when you think about it with hindsight that people expected this explosive kind of knockdown, drag out affair, because Duran had that whole kind of Latin machismo brand, and he just savaged Davey Moore for the WBA light middleweight title, which that was Duran's renaissance, his resurgence after what people thought he was finished when he lost to. When he quit against Sugar Ray Leonard, when he lost to Wilfredo Benitez, and when he lost also a 10-round decision to Kirtland Lang, who people in the States had never even heard of Kirtland Lang. We had over here, of course. But, so people thought Duran was done. Don King had torn up his contract and essentially said, you are worthless. And next minute, Bob Arum has some faith in Roberto. He comes back. He gets serious about training. He knocks out Pepino Cuevas in a kind of crossroads Latin.
Amazing. That was an amazing performance.
Yes.
And then when he fought Davey Moore, I think that was more of a highlight Davey Moore fight than it was, let's bring Duran back to life kind of fight.
It was supposed to be. That was supposed to be a rite of passage for Davey Moore, yes. I remember, I can't remember who it was, but he was described as a fearless forecaster in a Ring magazine, and he said, Duran is not going to beat Moore. He said, I only wish I was as certain about going to heaven. It's what I always stay with me. That he said that, obviously didn't work out too well wherever he is now. Who knows? But I must admit, I do love that you were talking about favorite fights of all time or favorite performances. You in the WhatsApp group in terms of future themes that we can explore, and Duran Moore would be one of mine. So that made people think that he was going to have a row with Hagler. You know what I mean? That he was going to come and bring it when that was never going to happen. When you think about it,
exactly. Ben, like you said, you would expect that to happen just from the nature of both fighters, but because both of them are trapped by their skills. That's number one. Fighters do not fight outside their skills. Many don't even fight outside their comfort zone. To be able to get outside your comfort zone is huge in boxing. But but one thing you'll never see fighters do is get outside of their skills. And so you will only do in the ring what you've practiced in sparring in the gym. And to get outside of that is a very, very unique individual. And to be able to adapt mid-fight and change what you're doing is also an admirable skill that very, very few fighters have. To be able to get outside of what you do in your nature, your very physical nature and emotional nature in the gym, you do not get outside of that in the ring. And the fighters that are able to do that, the ones that have the sense of the moment, like Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, I'm sure Marciano too. He was undefeated and thumped a lot of guys when he was behind on points, and he was able to break out of whatever he had to break
I'm not
out
sure
of.
Rocky adapted though. I think he just brought that same relentlessness, to be honest with you. But yeah.
Okay, so there again, I guess that's a form of
Job
change
done.
too. If you can't change yourself, force the environment to change.
Yeah, I think that's what he did. I think he was. I don't know, Rocky. I got a lot more respect for Rocky's legacy than I used to have. I used to be kind of.
Oh, yeah.
I used to be a Marciano denier or minimizer because to me, Silk, it was nothing against Rocky personally. It was just a straight loyalty to Muhammad Ali because when I was growing up, the kind of barroom debates, even when I was too young to go to bars, revolved around Rocky versus Ali. And it became a kind of which side are you on? Which side of the universe are you on? And I was very much on the Ali side. So I would tend to rubbish Marciano and I would attach myself to any intellectualized claims that he was overrated, and that he wouldn't have been Ali.
People continue to respect a fighter without, you know what I mean, like downplaying his abilities. That's absolutely sure. Like you're intelligent enough that you can prove a point of Marciano being great, but not the greatest. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he was absolutely a great and an all-time great to do what he did. Look, there are fighters that would get in the ring that could get in the ring, I should say, that were around Marciano's time, and they could never have beat Joe Louis. You know what I mean?
And because Rocky, he only started when he was about he was 20 years old or so. He was in his 20s when he started boxing, 23. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And Angelo Dundee tells a funny story. He says he first saw Rocky when it was at the Golden Gloves, or just like the first round in New York. It was the novice Golden Gloves, and someone said, "I got this heavyweight. He ain't too clever, but boy can he punch. But he doesn't know one hand from the other." And supposedly, perhaps the story has been romanticized, but Dundee said this guy asked him on the stage, when you're all gloved up waiting to go on, there's maybe bout number 7 is on and you're bout number 12, that kind of thing. And he said, can you show him how to throw a 1-2 at least, for God's sake? Just show him it's just 1-2. And he was trying to get him to do it. And he said the guy had no rhythm, but he looked, the one thing he said, he was already he didn't look particularly impressive, already, balding a little bit. And he thought, who is this guy? But there was something there, which mainly the power that he had. So Dundee is supposed to have shown him this 1-2 repetitively as much as he could. And then Rocky supposedly goes in a ring and performs that and knocks the guy out with it. But the point is that he was that threadbare when he started, and he started at an adult age. And look what he went on to, achieve. It is phenomenal, And when people say he fought old men or smaller guys, that's not. He was a smaller guy himself for a start.
Yeah, well, there are times when divisions go through their weaker phases too. You have that now. You had that when Larry Holmes was, you know what I mean? When he was at the top of his game, it's not like his best competition was, were the heavyweight greats. You know what I mean?
No, they weren't.
Okay, you had guys with great ability, also like Witherspoon and, you know what I mean, and The Truth, and and guys with great ability. But in turn, I don't know. It's such a complex.
It is complex. You know what? And you find yourself hemmed in by your own arguments if you're not vigilant sometimes. Because I'll say it's all about who you beat. Never mind title defenses or whatever. Sometimes I'll say that. But then I think, well, you could use some of those arguments against Larry Holmes' greatness. But I do think Larry Holmes is one of the greatest heavyweights to ever lived. And to me, his 7-year dominance does count. And it's perhaps dominant champions like that prevent fellow all-time greats because they dominate them and squash it all out of the competition sometimes. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
Also, the eye test, I just look at Larry Holmes' skills in a ring and what he can execute, and I think he's one of those best heavyweights we've ever seen. And all right, so if you can base it on Hall of Famers, he doesn't score well, but that sometimes that doesn't matter. I know how great Larry Holmes was, whether he beat a whole bunch of Hall of Famers or not. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So technically, Larry's style was very, very, I don't know, there was something about it. Not, I wouldn't say herky jerky. There was something about it that wasn't smooth, but he was very precise and deliberate and purposeful. And a lot of fighters throw a punch that didn't have, every time he threw a punch, he had a purpose behind it. And I love that. I love that about his style, the way in which he punched with that purpose, with that intent. It didn't matter whether he had George Foreman's power or anything like that, but you had to respect him. Every time you went in that ring, you're getting nothing but 100%, Larry. You know what I mean? And the fact so that he's considerably, I don't know, maybe like 10 years out of his prime, and he's still giving the top fighters in the world, if not even the world champs, he's giving them everything they could handle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that shows you. I think sometimes the way a fighter performs past prime, like Duran versus Hagler, for instance, is an indicator of their ultimate worth.
Yes.
As opposed to guys that had a phenomenal prime but burned out early, perhaps. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So even getting back to that Hagler Duran fight, which you were on, so I'll just say this is how I went through the 15 rounds. Right, the first round I gave to Hagler. I remember in the second round, like when Hagler, like Duran would feint Hagler, and when Hagler would react to the feint with two hands, and that's telling. That's telling when you feint somebody and they react like that.
Yeah,
if they're not too tightly wound, like you know what I mean. If they're not too respectful, it's not. I wouldn't say it's fear. It's never fear when two guys are fighting. I don't think it's never fear. It's always something else, like unpreparedness. You know what I mean? So that means you're either like intimidated or you're hyper aware. But I still gave that round 10-9 to Hagler. Third round, Hagler. The fourth round is when Duran started to come on, and that's when Duran's main weapon was that walk-in right hand, and he was expecting Hagler to come to him. And here's the thing that Duran did, which is so masterful. And he'd done it in a number of his fights. And it's a beautiful right hand. I haven't seen a lot of fighters throw it, but it's been thrown by a lot of fighters over time. And it's you have your southpaw walk into your punch. And what you do is you don't load up on it. It's just a matter of throwing your right hand almost like a jab, but you have a slight turn of the body on it. So this is my right hand, right? And you get that slight like this. And you don't overcommit with it, because when you overcommit, you go past and you expose yourself. So what Duran was able to do with this, and it was effective, but I don't think it was the best punch he could have used to defeat Hagler, is he threw the right hand straight out and had Hagler move into it. So he got his power in that right hand, even though it was so effortless for him, it multiplied because Hagler was coming into
walking onto it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So what he wanted to do really, and I think this looked like it was his fight plan to me, is to walk Hagler into the right hand, catch him on the point of the chin right here, where all the nerves connect from the brain right here, and that way hurt him. And that's what he was looking for the whole fight, and I think that's what he trained for in practice. But Hagler didn't necessarily give it to him, or Duran didn't quite set it up properly the way I thought he could have. So his main weapon was the right hand, and he wasn't able to land that clean. But the fourth round could have been Duran. The fifth round I gave to Duran for sure. The sixth round, Duran used to be able to like suffocate fighters, right? He would like fighters he'd move up against, like the first fight with Leonard. If he gets a chance to suffocate you and fight you on the inside or even mid-range to inside, he's got you. And Hagler, he didn't have the strength. The when we say strength, remember we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about, when I say that, I mean his ability to root himself in the ring and not be moved. With Hagler, Hagler moved him, so he couldn't stay on his spot. Duran couldn't find his spot in that ring. Usually, you would take that 1 foot and you would put it in the ground, and that's your anchor. And no one can move you off that. Leonard couldn't move him off it as a welterweight, and a lot of other fighters. Davey Moore couldn't move him off that spot, but Hagler could move him off that spot. Hagler had him rock, and even if he was catching him on the shoulder, he had Duran physically moving backwards.
So
And
it does
so,
matter. It does matter, right? It does matter. Those
what
aspects.
what does what matter?
Physicality, size, strength.
Well,
It does matter.
physicality obviously has something to do with it if that's the style you're fighting. But if Duran's letting Hagler fight that style of fight, then yeah. But these are the things you should know are Hagler's advantage going into it. For instance, if Duran, if I were, forgot it. If I was training somebody to fight Hagler, I would make sure you put your score with your left hand first, not your right hand. In fact,
As an
I would,
orthodox, yeah? As an orthodox.
as an orthodox fighter, he should have been using his left hand much more because his left hand is so much closer to Hagler when Hagler's a southpaw than his right hand. His right hand is the furthest thing away, and Hagler's not committing anyway with his punches. Hagler's got a decent reach. He wasn't the tallest dude, but he had long arms. He knew how to extend his arms, so he kept Hagler out. He kept Duran out here. But what? Even if Duran was throwing that chopping, that very short, direct, jabbing right hand, if he was coming with a left hand over on top of that, different fight. Absolutely different fight altogether.
Have you not noticed, though, that do you find that southpaws tend to block your left jab quite a lot? At least more than the orthodox guy does. No? You don't think so?
Never. I've never had a southpaw block a jab. Never.
You never had a
Absolutely.
southpaw block the jab at all?
No. They'll move away from it, or most of the time they won't even acknowledge it because most southpaws are used to having orthodox fighters figure them out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they get in the ring and they know that their trainer said to them, "Okay, you're fighting a southpaw, so you got to blah blah blah."
Move to your left, throw your right hand straight right down.
Exactly, the same old conventional BS. But when a southpaw is going to fight an orthodox, and it's like it's every day, and nobody says, "Okay, so listen, make sure you always come over your right hand over his jab with your right hand, or make sure you always." Because it's always there. So why wouldn't you use that against the fighter? Why wouldn't you change that up and not do the predictable? And that was the thing with Hagler. He did for a while anyway, in the early parts of that fight, and the fights that Duran started gaining ground. He did the predictable, and if he would have taken it into a realm of unassuredness for Duran, where he wasn't sure what was coming up, this would have been a much easier fight for him. And that's why when Hagler said after the fight, he goes, the next time I fight him, I'll stop him. He would make those are the adjustments he would have made. He would have.
Yeah, he might have done, because
sure. Yeah, he understood now. So see, sometimes with Hagler, and it was really interesting. You'd look at him and he'd fight certain guys, and you'd see him fight, and you'd be like, that doesn't look very confident to me. This guy, he's the strongest fighter. He hits the hardest. He's in the best condition. He has a great chin. He has all these things. I don't understand why he's apprehensive at this moment. His body language is telling me something other than what he is. You know what I mean? Other than what he's doing. And then he gets in the ring with Tommy Hearns, and he has no hesitation whatsoever. But I think that's also because all that time, all that build up to the fight, and a lot of people were questioning him after the other fights, and he's like, okay, this is gangbusters for me. It was more than just maybe whatever dislike or disrespect he made for Hearns. It was the fact that everybody in the boxing world was saying, you're not the monster that we thought you were. You're bald.
Yeah, they called him Marginal Marvin and stuff like that, the journalists, and But he was coming off a good win, a devastating win over Mustafa Hamsho, which injected some juice into the fight because Hearns had annihilated Duran, and then Marvin had put paid to Hamsho, which it fed well into the marketing. But you are right. After Duran, he fought Juan Roldan and suffered that bogus knockdown. And even though he did a total number on Roldan, and I thought he looked fantastic actually in that fight, but a lot of
he was amazing in that.
I think so, but a lot of people were critical of performances, or they thought they called it workmanlike was the adjective they used, So I think you're right that against Tommy Hearns, that really was his chance to cement his legacy and define it on his terms, how he wanted to be remembered. Yes, I am a cautious by nature counterpuncher, and yes, there's a lot of nuances to what I do, but I want you to see me as the monster and marvelous Marvin Hagler. And the story about the dressing rooms and the different vibe in both the changing rooms and the camps. Hagler said to the Petronis, "I feel good tonight," and someone's going down. And Tommy was supposedly surrounded by too many Kronk fighters and supposedly getting a leg massage off some hanger-on, which made Manny Stewart go ballistic. And do you know what Jimmy Paul said? Funny enough, after the KO loss to Hagler, he said that he thought Tommy should retire. Jimmy Paul being Tommy's stablemate. Yeah, a very good fighter too. He said, I think Tommy's always a little leery going into the big one. I think he can't win the big one. And he actually said, I think he should retire, which turned out to be off the mark. Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, but he was facing it because that was only Hearns' second loss. He at that point he had 40 wins and 2 losses, and his losses were to Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler. So
there's no shame in that. Are you kidding? I mean, obviously, that's not what Hearns wanted. Hearns didn't, he wasn't there to be, the third wheel, but and he definitely. I mean, that's crazy. I just can't believe that he's Sugar Ray. Tommy should retire behind that. It's a fight, and in fighting things happen, and here's the thing: when Hearns went into that fight, when you hit Hearns, he's absolutely like when you hit him, it's not like you hit other fighters. Like you hit him and you feel like a solidness, like nothing budges. So when you hit him good, it's got to reverberate through the body. So you have punches. So you have punches like Hagler that get a chance to hit you, and that's not going to reverberate. Something's going to break, either his hand or your body, and it's always been your body. Hagler's that kind of puncher, and Hearns didn't have that the thick enough. Like you look at some fighters like James Toney, for instance. I'm sure that if you were to measure his bone density, is different from everybody else's.
Yeah.
It's just
Serge Ali there just said, did Tommy look very dicey against Mark Madole? No, he didn't, I don't think. Do you know what? I don't know if I've ever seen that fight, but I thought he did enough of a job on Mark Madole. Mark Madole was on it was on that triple hitter card, wasn't it? When Duran fought Robbie Sims and Baron McGuigan fought Steve Cruz, June 23rd, 1986, Las Vegas. Do you remember the Tommy Hearns Mark Madole fight by chance, Michael?
I do remember it a little bit. I do know that I was, surprised that it went to the length that it went. Yeah, it went 8 rounds. But I didn't see Hearns in any kind of trouble at any time.
No, I don't think.
But the fact that Hearns is such a devastating puncher, and Mark Madole, I mean, he was a very good fighter, and he took a good shot. I think there was something about him. Maybe he was just able to take a little bit off the punch at the last second. Maybe there's something subtle going on. But it's interesting because there was another guy who was at Randy Shields, and maybe was it McCracken as well, or somebody else that fought Hearns.
Jeff McCracken.
And also Murray Sutherland. Maybe it's Irish fighters. I don't know, but he just didn't seem to have the same zip behind his punches against certain types of fighters. He hit him flush, but you wouldn't get that same reaction. It's probably has a lot.
He slaughtered Jeff McCracken, by the way. Though he slaughtered McCracken. It was Ernie Singletree that took him the distance after he lost to Sugar Ray. He fought Ernie Singletree. He fought. I think he went the distance with another guy as well. Like I say, Murray Sutherland was.
But I'm thinking like, was it Shields or Ranzani or
Randy Shields? He did a number on while he was still a welterweight. Wasn't Ranzani. People get him mixed up, but no.
But one of them. But was it late? One of them went into it was past the 10th round. Like, come on.
You mean when he was a welterweight?
Yeah, when he was a welterweight.
Randy Shields went 13 with Tommy, and I think he retired.
Okay, so there you go, 13 rounds. But I don't think he put a 10 count on him. He didn't drop him. It wasn't a stop on cuts or overwhelming.
No, not at all. It sounds like he struggled. Yeah, it sounds like he struggled with it. He only retired due to injury.
So that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Harold Weston gave Tommy Hearns a pretty tough.
Harold Weston was another one. Yeah. Harold Weston was another one, and you just think. I mean. Sugar Ray thought Pablo Baez gave him a little issue too. So,
yeah, because Tommy fought Pablo Baez on the undercard of Leonard Kalula, right?
Yeah, Ayub Kalula. Yes, absolutely right.
But
I just know so when I was thinking where am I going back to where did we leave off with the Hagler Duran fight? I thought, well, the 7th round, Hagler was winning on volume. You know what I mean? Duran was respecting Hagler's power a little bit. Round 8, yeah. So round 8, I gave to Hagler on volume. Round 9, this is where I thought where Duran could start making a move, and if he was using that left hand, he would be able to come over Hagler's guard or high right hand.
Yeah.
Round 10, I thought, what's my thought here? The left hand is, again, his left hand, he could be sharper with the left hand. He wasn't using it. He was pot shotting, looking for the right hand. I guess Hagler kind of had a cut on his eye or under his eye, had a little swelling at that point.
A mouse.
Yeah, and then Hagler got on his toes and started boxing. And if anything allowed Duran to go the distance at that point, it was a switch up. To Duran, Hagler acknowledged Duran's ability, presence, power, whatever Duran was doing. It frustrated Hagler. He didn't get him out. Maybe Hagler was taking the 10th round so he could say, okay, these are the final 4 or 5 rounds, and I'm going to be able to take it to another level. Let me get up on my toes, box him out, and then make a re-entry, make a thrust in again. But that's, to me, I saw that as one of those confidence issues. You know what I mean? Like, I obviously can't say, I'm not in Hagler's shoes, and there are people that know him better than me, and I'm sure they would think it's something else. But what matters is what it means to the guy sitting in the other corner across from you. How is he going to interpret your actions? And if I was fighting Hagler and all of a sudden, after going toe-to-toe with me for 10 rounds, he got up on his toes and he started moving around and boxing, I'm saying, well, I'm doing something right here. And that's going to re-energize me and recharge me, right? There's something I was doing to make him switch his game up. So now we got to step on that and find out what that is and goes from there. But so Hagler gets up on his toes, boxes, but Duran's not able to take advantage of it either, right? And the 12th round, 11th, 12th round, Duran starts letting his hands go more. And Hagler took the round off, and I kind of gave that round to Duran. The 13th round was kind of pick 'em. That was like a recalibration round for Hagler as well. And then the 14th round, Hagler reapplied himself. And it's funny about Hagler because he doesn't have a distinctive style, right? Like he doesn't have, like you look at Duran, you look at Leonard, you look at Hearns, they have things about them that are very, like Hagler looks very like basic. Let's just say basic.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure I agree with that.
When I say in terms of identifying traits, something different than I'm saying in identifying traits. I'm not talking about his ability. I'm talking about his identifying.
Yeah, but even though I think Hagler's movement was brilliant and distinctive, his switch hitting was very distinctive, and
to me, all that was very conventional. Like that's how if you were to go in the gym and learn to box, Hagler would be the exact prototype. You would say that's how you box.
Do it like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And he didn't have like what would be his own.
What about the jump shots? What about the jump shots? Jumping in with a hook, either stance.
Oh well, yeah, he jumped in with like a power jab, right? So
or a hook.
Well, yeah, I guess he would do it with the hook, but most of the time I see him do it. He did it with the lead right? Like that's what he hit Hearns with it. He hit Hearns with that jump in jab kind of thing.
He did, but he did it with hooks lots of times. I think there was some distinctive Haglerisms that I understand what you mean.
I'm talking about not even in terms of his punching style. I'm talking about in his presence, like in his movements and there wasn't a distinctive style. It was very, I mean, when you say ordinary, Hagler's not an ordinary fighter. He's a great and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But his movement, his mannerisms, his style, his poise is something that you would see generally. His ability and the power and his endurance, and his resiliency, all those things were beyond exceptional. But when you look at his his style, you look at it and you say to yourself, "Well, it looks kind of regular to me." And I think that's why a lot of people shortchanged Hagler in terms of his ability, because he looks extremely beatable. Like you look to anybody, in the boxing world, and you see the guys that stand out. They stand out. Camacho,
But
Robinson,
his
Ali.
whole thing during his reign was that he was unbeatable, and it was like he was like this wall guard in the middleweight division, and nobody thought that Camacho looked less vulnerable than Hagler. You know, in real time in that era, they didn't think that they thought there was a greater chance of Camacho getting beat than there was Hagler getting beat. That was the perception. Hagler had an aura of invincibility.
Mm-hmm.
He did, right?
Yeah, he did. He had an aura of invincibility for people who weren't boxing, but not for fighters who were contenders. Like you'd look at him and you'd say to yourself, "Yeah, this guy's beatable." You're not looking at him and you're seeing Sugar Ray Robinson and all the dexterity and all the speed and all this double left, triple left hooks, all that kind of stuff. You're seeing a man that just put in hard work.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean, right? Because he wasn't excessively fast. He wasn't, absolutely dripping with flair. It was because he was such a good all rounder and had such good fundamentals. You could almost argue, all time great and devastating as he could be, I still understand where you're coming from. That you could say he was kind of basic. Of those four great names that lit up the 1980s, he's the one you'd say was a bit more like an identikit boxer that you might have learned it from. You might have got it from a textbook and be like, yeah, this makes sense. Put all that together.
Yeah, all together. But again, the attributes, the power, the conditioning, the mental fortitude as well. You know what I mean? There was times you dig down into the fight, you had to show that kind of stuff. When he was challenged, he took the challenge on. You know what I mean? So all those things. But yeah, there was room there. There was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to because I don't ever want to downplay the greatness of Marvin Hagler. He is absolutely, you know what I mean? Respect him 100%. He did things that so many fighters can't do. But there was just that one little reality I kind of had to pull out. And it always questioned me, like as I was a fighter growing up, and I seen him do all these things and I couldn't understand all that other stuff. But as a fighter in retirement, I was able to put it together a little bit more after watching him fight, and put it all into perspective. And did you see the questionnaire from SA1?
Yeah, Sarge.
Yeah,
he asked how the Harold Graham fight would have gone. Harold was Hagler's mandatory for a little while, certainly with the WBC, but maybe with the other sanctioning bodies as well.
Now he's mandatory with the IBF, actually.
Yeah, you were.
Yes,
so you were. Yeah,
with the IBF, yes. But before he fought Sugar Ray Leonard.
Okay.
So I really don't think that fight would have went too well for Harold.
You know what? I agree again. I think that. But you're talking about the Hagler that lost to Leonard. I think that would have. I think Harold Graham would have had a good shot at having a similar campaign and causing Hagler problems. I don't say he'd have won, but I do think it would have been very interesting in 1987.
Really, you think so?
Yeah,
against
for sure.
Against the Hagler that fought Sugar Ray Leonard is what you're saying.
Yeah, because that's when it would have happened. He'd have fought him instead of Sugar Ray Leonard if he'd have pressed if his claim had been pressed and he'd have had it served.
Yeah, but Harold Graham wasn't quite Sugar Ray.
He wasn't, absolutely not. I understand that. You know what I mean? I understand that.
Very fast, hit hard, all of us, that kind of stuff. But here's the thing with Harold, from what I saw, and absolutely respect him. He was fast, he hit hard, had great stamina, had focus, all the rest of those kinds of things.
And southpaw.
Yeah, his and southpaw, but which really doesn't make any difference in the scheme of things, really, because his head is in the same place. His head's in the same place whether he was orthodox or southpaw, and that's the thing with him. He didn't. I do not believe I remember seeing him when he had head movement that would. Only head movement is going to puzzle Hagler. If your head stays in the same place as when you're punching, no, you're going to get murdered, because every time you punch, that's where he's coming.
Harold was a limbo dancer, right? Harold
Okay, but with
That's for
Hagler,
sure.
one of the things with Hagler is if you stay like he's coming back after you've punched, he's coming back that same line you took out, he's taking back to you. If you punch and your head is here, where am I? If here's my punch and my head is right behind my punch, that's exactly where he's coming back. And Harold didn't do this. He didn't do that kind of stuff that Duran did. Hearns didn't either. And look where it got Hearns. And Sugar Ray got offline. You have to get offline with Hagler. Caveman Lee didn't get offline. A ton of fighters, if you don't get offline with Hagler, no way. Absolutely no way.
So you think Harold's tendency to move in straight lines and lean back from punches would have been the problem? That limbo dancer.
Absolutely, plays absolutely into Marvin's hands, because if you're working in straight lines, if you're not giving him something he hasn't seen before, forget it. He'll adjust to that real quick. You know what I mean? And when Hagler feels like he can load up on you, it's over. I mean, look at Simpson. Yeah. Simpson had a great chin, and Hagler just buckled him. Hampshire's chin is insane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I texted Tony Simpson today about coming on this show. I said that we'd love to have him on soon if he can make it. So I'm waiting for a response. And do you know, on Sunday we have a guest. We have former British super bantamweight champion Richie Wenton joining us as a guest. Hopefully Gary will be back as well on Sunday. That's going to be interesting, Silk, because we've never had 4 talking heads at the same time. You know how chaotic it is with the 3 of us. Can you imagine how it's going to be? 3 of us trying to interview one guy. But Richie Wenton is a Scouser like you. He's a Liverpool lad. Okay, he fought Marco Antonio Barrera, and he also has one of his opponents tragically, Bradley Stone, passed away as a result of the fight. And there's a statue outside the Peacock Gym in Canning Town. Peacock's moved, but the statue is still there of Bradley Stone. So that's kind of a big signpost of tragedy in East London boxing, and it'll be, unfortunate as the incident was, it will be interesting to talk to Richie about that and how it affected him. So we have a great guest on Sunday coming. I imagine Gary Stratcher will be back as well. I imagine you've got somewhere you've got to be, which is why we had to do this early today.
Thank you.
No problem.
On the road. That's the only way us hobos can make money.
Absolutely. You've got to do what you can.
Do you have hobos in England?
We do, but we just call them tramps. We do. That's what they're called.
I prefer hobo is politically correct. I prefer hobo.
It's a bit like because it's a bit like you were earlier on, but backstage and you're telling me about trim, the term trim, the American meaning of trim. Yeah. I mean, I had a trim only yesterday, a haircut, right? But you mean something else when you say trim, don't you?
Hey, listen, you're lucky if at this age you can get trim. More power to you.
Go with it. Run with that shit. Okay, always a pleasure, Silk. We'll be back, guys. We're back on Sunday at the more regular time of 9 p.m. UK time or 4 p.m. EST. In the meantime, don't do anything we wouldn't do. Be lucky and keep punching. Peace out.